Thank you to Sakuraco and TokyoTreat for sponsoring today's video. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So today we are going to be doing a kind of another mini OC comic video. Now let me get started with sketching so that we can kind of get that out of the way. Kind of like right off the bat, I went ahead and changed the layer color, which allows you to change, basically you can use any color on this layer, but once you turn on the layer color, it changes all your lines, your marks, everything to be one set color that you've already set it to. So in this case, I'm using the color black, which you can see in my color wheel, but on my layer color, I have it set to kind of this mid-tone blue. So everything that I place on this particular layer will be turned into that color. I do find it easier to work this way. Just make sure that by the time I do get to doing line art, it's a little bit easier for me to differentiate between my sketch and the line art color. But also I've seen plenty of artists do kind of like the opposite, where you would sketch in black and use whatever color you want. And then later on, you can turn on the layer color mode while you work on the line art portion. So because today is a Valentine's Day, I thought it'd be cute to do something that's not like super obvious towards Valentine's Day, but something kind of related. So as you can see at the very top of this little comic page, it's gonna be fairly not super long. It's about, I think, 15 pages or 16 pages. I forget. I think it's 15 pages that we're going to be working on today, but I'm going to be showing you guys only about 7 pages so that I don't spoil the rest of the comic and leave it a little bit more like a surprise for you guys. But at the very top of this page is kind of like the title of the comic, which I'm gonna call it, I don't know if it's called florography or is it florography? I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's basically means the language of flowers, which is going to be the premise for today's little comic. So I initially did not have any plans or story ideas to do a mini comic for that was like condensed enough that doesn't take a whole lot of time, because one kind of like giant hurdle I find for making comics is that it is a very painstakingly long process to do, because you have to go through, I guess, like planning or thumbnailing or sketching prior. You have to plan out dialogue and potentially plan out panels. Now, in previous videos, I actually do plan out panels a little bit more, not meticulously, but I do have like a good semblance of it. This time I did not. I did end up writing the dialogue on one side, planning out some of the panels, and then using some sticky notes to finalize a few things. Maybe I'll put a picture of it, maybe not, we'll see. But this time I didn't really have too much to go off of, other than the fact that I thought it'd be cute to do another, I guess, like flower lesson with Masaki and have Koji be once again our student of the day for learning about something to do relating to flowers. Please ignore the fact that I spelt florography wrong for the first portion of the video. For some reason, while I was sketching out what I wanted for our potential typography, I just missed the O. I will change it later because once I ended up doing the line art, at some point I'll remember, I'll crop it, add the extra O back in, and then we can proceed from there. But I think for the most part, sketching went pretty smoothly. According to my footage for the first 7 panels, which I'm going to be showing you guys portions of the sketching, as well as the line art and some of the coloring. So as I was sketching, I think it only took me about an hour and 20 minutes to do all of the sketching, which feels a little long, but I guess it's me trying to figure out the paneling and everything. I think it would have went a little bit more smoothly if I planned it a little bit better during the sketching portion in my sketchbook, which is kind of like the place I like to do majority of my planning before we hit to doing anything digitally. And I was struggling to draw these roses, which for some reason I ended up just drawing, I think, 5 different roses instead of just like drawing the one and copying and pasting for the purpose of like the lesson type of thing. So basically how the premise for the first half of this comic goes is the fact that Koji's just hanging out with Masaki as Masaki's at Koji's grandparents' flower shop where he works kind of like part-time at, and he's arranging a bouquet of flowers kind of like in preparations for Valentine's Day. So he's kind of like running out of pink flowers in this case, and Koji is wondering, you know, why is pink and red flowers so popular around Valentine's Day or like romantic events? Why are people usually gifting those to their loved ones rather than, let's say, white or yellow or orange or purple or blue, which purple, blue, I did not, and black, I did not include into this because I feel like they're just more fancier colors, which are less natural, I guess. So they're less common, I think. And Masaki takes the time to use this as more like a teaching thing where you can learn about choreography, which I find kind of neat. I did not really know like the sole reason on why this was a thing. I knew there was colors associated with certain meanings for flowers, but I thought it was based mostly on the fact that, you know, people typically say like, oh, blue is for calm and sadness, red is for like anger or passion or love. Like there's very typical generic type of representations for colors, and I didn't know if that was just like placed upon flowers, but it seems like it was a little bit more before then. Kind of like working more in conjunction with the type of flower as well kind of changes the meanings, but I didn't want to get into all of that, so we're just focusing solely on roses. And I've already knew about like the basic knowledge of colors, especially for like roses and tulips, and I think peonies as well. Anything that's kind of in the red, pink, orange, yellow, white range, I think they all have very similar meanings across a lot of the same flowers. So that's kind of like the basic premise for the comic for the first half. The second half, there kind of gives a little bit more reasoning on what Masaki is working on, and kind of just something cute towards, kind of like a nod towards, I guess, Valentine's Day as a theme. I didn't want to do something like overly romantic or something similar to like a confession or anything like that, because I think that's what I ended up doing last year. So it's like very much my OC mini comic was solely based on, I think, Akemi and Sato's confession back when they're in their first year of high school, and I made it very pink and very soft, and it's very cute, but I was not up to the challenge to do another one, so you can see that for this one I ended up doing only chibis this time around. So basically at this point we are finished off with the sketching portion, and then later on we'll be moving on to the line arting portion. But in the meantime, let me tackle a few of these panels. So before I tackle the dreaded line art, let's take a little snack break with TokyoTreat and Sakuraco. Time to experience limited edition and seasonal snacks from Japan from the comfort of your own home with these lovely monthly snack boxes. TokyoTreat is a fun and exclusive monthly snack box that is packed with some of Japan's coolest and funnest treats. Each month, you'll get a Japan exclusive premium snack and a limited edition chip and noodles. They always have a very fun variety of snacks ranging from like sweet to salty or even to savory. You can see that the box for this month is very cute as it's themed around Valentine's Day, and I always loved their themed boxes because of this very cute design. Sakuraco is a monthly Japanese artisan snack box that supports local snack makers across Japan. Each box is carefully crafted with traditional and seasonal snacks that are hard to come by outside of Japan, like mochi, dorayaki, senbeis, and even more, including a signature Japanese tea, which I'm always excited about, and exclusive homeware items. The homeware from this month's box already stood out to me right away at the very beginning. It's this lovely vintage kimono cloth pouch, and it looks like there are a few different designs that you can get. All designs showcase the traditional pine bamboo plum motif, which I think looks very, very pretty. Both boxes come with a 24-page cultural guide booklet, and it includes information regarding ingredients and allergens of each of the snacks, but also informs you of little tidbits revolving around the culture and traditions in Japan, like learning about how the Japanese celebrate Valentine's occasion or Valentine's holiday, as well as learning about traditions and their blessings. Each month has a different theme, meaning that you get to try out a whole new selection of new treats and snacks every month. For example, TokyoTreat's theme for the month of February is Super Sweet Valentine, while Sakuraco's box is a Kyoto Valentine's. Okay, time for my favorite part. I got super excited when I saw this month's tea from Sakuraco. I don't think I've ever really had this type of hojicha before, or even this flavor combination in general. So this is the caramel bergamot hojicha, and it was very caramel forward in terms of both aroma and the taste, but I do like that you do get the subtle bergamot taste from the entire tea. I just like that a little bit kind of like citrusy floral taste accompanied by kind of like that roasted tea flavor as well as the caramel. So kind of like other than the tea, there were a few things that piqued my curiosity and things that I would gravitate towards within the snack boxes. So obviously the Gano milk chocolate was kind of like a classic. I'm a big fan of milk chocolate. and a fan of the Kit Kats as well, which this time it was strawberry shortcake flavor, which I feel like I could never go wrong with. I was also shocked to see how large these soy sauce senbis were. Kind of a nice classic soy sauce flavor, which I also really enjoyed. While from the Sakuraco box, I tried and really liked the chocolate mochi. They had like a nice marshmallow layer that was like sandwiched between the outside mochi layer and the nice chocolate inside filling. But I have been also liking a little bit more of like coffee recently, so I really enjoyed the little coffee jari mame, which actually means pebble beans, which I think is super cute. And I really enjoyed the flavor of these. I feel like they're something I would have to eat slowly. I'm still trying to get more used to just liking coffee in general, I guess. So if you would like to get a box for yourself or want to give these as a lovely gift to your family or friends or even your partner for this love-filled month, then do check out the links in the description. Thank you again to Sakuraco and TokyoTreat for sponsoring today's video. Now let's talk about the line art portion. Now that we're back, we can start working on the line art. So here's an example of one of the panels. This is like one of my favorite ones because I think Kaisen looks super cute. But I was trying to see if I could match the same kind of aesthetic of this particular comic, and I think I ended up using only the G pen for the line art. I think I used it for the coloring, and there's like very subtle, soft kind of gradients only for certain areas. So for the most part, we're going to do very clean line art for the most part using the G pen. I think I used about a size 10 on this canvas. But before we do that, we need to set up our panels. So luckily in Clip Studio Paint, it does have this very helpful tool to set up your page so that you have kind of like your border, and then it has other things that allows you to break the border to make each of your panels. Once the panels are made on your layers, you can see that they're separated into folders so that you can work solely on certain panels rather than on the entire image itself. And I find that very helpful, especially for organization. So I went ahead, ended up making all of our borders, making our breaks so that we can have our panels and separations for each of the different parts of the comic. After that, I am going to be lowering the opacity of our kind of like teal layer. I moved it to the very bottom and turned off the background for each of the panels so that I could see my sketch underneath. And then we can make a new folder and start working on the line art, which I mentioned. I am using just the G pen. I have the stabilization set to 100. I've seen some people say that 100 is a little bit too slow for them, but for me, the more stabilization causes me to correct a lot less later, so I feel like I work a lot faster with higher stabilization if I'm doing line art, because that way I'm fussing a little bit less with having to go over lines over and over again, and hopefully in turn making the line art process just a lot quicker. So the footage you're seeing right now is just me working on the line art in real time, and you can see that it's still a fairly slow process, but it's a little bit therapeutic if I know I can just follow my sketch. I don't have to do too much thinking, but we are going to speed it up along the way because I don't want to spend too much time just working on the line art. I do apologize that I know a lot of you guys also find line art from other people very therapeutic, but for me, it's like painstakingly long. It definitely took me a long time just to line the panels. I think in terms of time for each of the steps, I think sketching goes the fastest for me, and then I think coloring might be second because it's a lot of color picking and repetition, especially depending on the subject or what you're coloring per se. I keep everything like pretty simple, but line art, maybe it's because of the flowers. It did take me quite a long time, I think in total for the footage, because I tried my best to record all the footage and then that way I can decide whether or not I want to scrap certain parts or not. But from start to finish of just the 7 panels, like I said, I think it's about 1 hour and 20 for sketching. I don't remember what was the duration for the line art and the coloring, but the entire process, including the sketching, took I think 6 hours and 40 minutes, I believe, or 6 hours and 20. I think it's 6 hours and 40. So still very long of a process, and this is me doing about just under half of the panels, and I feel like the first half of the panels were a little bit easier for me to color and to line and sketch, so I don't know. It might have taken me a lot longer. This is like me working on it for the last, I think 2 days. I kind of split it up so that I did kind of the first 7 panels so that I could do recording. And recording does make the session go a little bit longer because I do have to be a little bit conscious about segmenting the recording process. Alongside that, you know, if I'm taking breaks, I can't just take a break and leave my recording equipment still running, or kind of the opposite. If I take a break and I come back, I have to make sure that I have everything set up so that I don't forget. So I'm a little bit more conscious every time I do recording, which in turns I feel like has a little bit more pressure and I might work a little bit more slowly. So maybe the last half was a little bit quicker for me in terms of just being able to lock in so I don't have to worry about any external factors. But let's talk about I guess the line art, not too much to talk about. For the most part, I'm just using only the G pen. Like I said, I'm using the size 10 for majority of everything. And to make things easier for myself, I ended up putting all of my lines pretty much on one layer, with the exception of another character who has an accessory that requires me to put on a separate layer just for ease of movement and using the circle tools. AKA I'm making glasses, so there is an appearance of some other OCs later on in the comic other than Koji and Masaki. I think I was a little bit confused on what I wanted to do for the style. I knew for the chibis I was going to replicate the same one that I did for when Kaisen got lost. I just like how clean it looks and how bold the colors are. So while I did the line art all in one layer, the only colors that I really need to alter for the line art is just their iris colors. So for Koji it'll be blue, for Masaki it'll kind of be like a mid-tone green, and then I changed, I think, Koji's scar color to be a little bit softer and Masaki's mole. Even though like Masaki's mole, I've drawn it as just like pure black as before, but for some reason I ended up making it softer. I don't know if I like that choice, but I ended up doing that. Oh, also, another thing to touch on. For my previous comics, I've always done the text by hand, but I just hate how my handwriting looks in the uppercase or drawing like all capitals. So instead, I went ahead and went to 1001fonts.com and I downloaded one that's called, I think, Bubble Sans. And it's pretty much just like the similar comic or manga kind of text that I see a lot of scanlation groups use, or just comics in general. So because I don't like how my handwriting looks for a lot of like uppercase letters, I decided that I will switch to that so everything is more consistent. It's a little bit easier to read, it's legible. So yeah, I ended up just changing it kind of like partway through because I was getting frustrated writing all of the descriptions or little points about the flowers, and things were just like not fitting. Some were misaligned, some of my font spacing or like my lettering is just inconsistent. I feel like I have a love-hate relationship with the way my handwriting is at times, especially if I take my time. I write fairly small and fairly neat, but other times I do more of like a scribbly writing, or if I'm writing in all caps, it's just everything is wonky, or writing in pen, everything is wonky. But enough rambling about that. We have our line art for the first 7 pages kind of finished. So everything I just did normal black line art for everything. I don't really have intentions of changing it other than the eyes and very small details. So still referring back to this previous comic, I wanted to kind of keep the coloring consistent. So I'm going to have that one open on the side. So if you ever see me leave a gap on the, I guess, left-hand side of the canvas or canvas space, and the overview of our comic layout, that's because I have the reference open. I always forget that sometimes when I'm screen recording like this, it kind of hides my windows if I don't screen record my entire screen and rather just like one window, which happens to be like the Clip Studio Paint window instead. So you guys actually can't see some of my floating panels or things that are in Clip Studio Paint. So for coloring, to keep everything simple and like the previous comics that I've done in the past, I am doing cell shading with very minimal soft shading. So for base colors and flats, we're just filling it in mostly with the bucket tool for our flats, kind of like missing areas, as well as our shadows and highlights. I'm just using the G pen as well. It's just nice and crisp. It makes everything just look a little bit more consistent if I'm not using something that has like opacity change, or like, you know, at the edge it like tapers off and, you know, fades into white or whatever. So just keeping things nice, crisp and clean. So The only areas that I ended up adding any sort of gradation is in the background, as well as for cheeks and the blush. So, or I guess like any warm part of the skin. So I added to the area where the nose would be, as well as their cheeks. And I think that's pretty much the only areas that I do. For shadows for the skin, ended up using a pale pinkish purple. And I use that for everyone's skin tone, regardless of their skin color. It just works to be a little bit more warmer. I think the only exception will be Moriko, which she does make an appearance, kind of. Other than that, for our hair and our clothing, I also put these on one layer, and I will shade and add highlights in a very similar way. So for the shadows, ended up using more of like a purpley grayish blue. So it's a little bit on the cooler side. I was kind of debating if I wanted to make everything very warm and pink. So you can see that when I was working on the highlights, I was using a very pastel kind of pink color, and I have it set to screen to make sure that everything appears a little bit lighter, regardless of what color is I'm highlighting, I guess. It just changes whatever's like on top. So for me, I ended up not liking the pink too much, so I ended up switching it to more of like a bright yellow. I just think it looks a little bit warmer without being too out of place for everybody's colors. Then we're gonna move on to Koji. So the first few coloring portions for some of the panels did take a little bit longer, because it was kind of like me just kind of deciding what colors I wanted to use for each of the characters, and then later on I'll open them up in separate windows so that we can purely just color pick, and that way it'll be easier for myself to keep everyone looking consistent, and the coloring portion appears to be, you know, a little bit more faster in that case, because I don't have to do a lot of thinking. It's just basically me doing a lot of fills, and then after filling we do shadows and our highlights, and that's about it. So there are some areas that I was debating on not making completely flat, and this is one of them, but because it's kind of like our title or our intro to the comic, I decided to make it like a very pastel pink after adding a few different tones and then adding a bit of a gradation to soften everything so that our font can still stand out from the background. Then other places will be when I'm working on other flowers. I decided to take the route of actually doing a little bit more of like painterly approach and some rendering rather than just pure cell shading, which I'm still a little bit iffy on whether or not I want to change at this point. I think as I'm doing the voiceover, I'm kind of flip-flopping. I kind of went from wanting to do cell shading, and then I ended up doing it more painterly, and then kind of switching back and forth. But once I finished the comic, I liked the look of it, but now that I'm looking at it again while editing, I don't know if I am totally sold. So I don't know. I don't know if it just feels too out of place because everything else is like flat and more like sharp edges rather than kind of like leaving more colors. There's like softer gradation, softer coloring, all that stuff. So you can tell me if you think it looks out of place or whether or not you think it's kind of like fine as is. I don't know. I'm still trying to think as well. So as much as it is kind of fun doing OC comics, because I'm not really like story focused on my OCs right now, nor am I like a person who likes doing story writing per se, or it's not very good at it. I guess we can put it that way. I don't have a lot of ideas for OC comics, so maybe in the future I'll do like another community post for you guys to give me scenarios for my OCs, and then I can do comics based off of that. Other than that, I want to do maybe a redraw of a comic that I did in my sketchbook, which I filmed for like one of the sketchbook videos, because not only have I done comics of my OCs digitally, and I've done them in a few different styles. Like I said, Sato and Akemi's was very much not like the chibi style. It's like a little bit more detailed, my normal kind of like anime-ish kind of look, but then everything was done monochromatically with more like pinks and whites. And then I did one that was Masaki and Kaisen, trying to emulate more of a manga style, which I ended up not liking. I might redo that one actually. I think it could be fun. And then I have the Lost one, which is like the other chibi version. And then I think there was another one where I did the line art and the coloring, I believe, in Procreate. That one I also don't really like the look of. It looks very messy to me. But some of the ones in my sketchbook I think could be fun to redraw as well, where I did the tones and the values with Copic markers. So it was kind of fun picking grayscale colors and like manually inking it. There's just something nice about doing comics and just inking traditionally that I sometimes enjoy more than I do when it comes to digital line arting. I guess I've always had gripes about it, but something I would like to continue to work on and just experiment until I find something that I think I like and will stick. So I don't have to think too hard when working on it, because last thing I want to do is emulate something like it but not be able to emulate it ever again. So I'm gonna find a good happy medium. But let's jump back in to talk about the coloring. So this is what I was talking about in terms of changing the coloring style to be more painterly, and we going more towards like soft shading. So I was having a hard time trying to think about how I wanted to do this. I think the coloring for the petals and stuff just look a little bit off because of how bold the line art was. So I tried adding white to knock it back so it looks a little bit softer. Ended up not really liking it either, and then just moving on to our second pair of flowers, which happens to be yellow and orange. So for these ones, similar steps, similar process, but I did end up just shading them a little bit more in a simple-ish way and adding very subtle color shifts rather than going full-blown render where I was pushing the values like a heck of a lot, because I think that was part of my problem, that I still want the lines to stand out enough, but I want the softer colors still, because I just think they look pretty for something like flowers and stuff I wanted to at least attempt. So yeah, ended up liking these ones a little bit more. When I started working on the one that's like right after orange and yellow, which happens to be white, still wasn't too pleased about it. I don't really remember if I ended up showing it because I thought maybe the coloring portion would be a little bit too long if I go through the time lapse for every panel. So we're skipping over to, I think, our last panel of the 7 that I will be showing you guys, and then I will show you kind of like an overview of what the comic actually looks like. But I won't be reading it out loud for you guys. Apologies. In the future, if you want me to do that, please let me know. Otherwise, I think I will post this hopefully to my OC card so that you guys can read it at your own pace rather than in a video format, which might be a little bit more difficult. I think that's it for the coloring. I guess the only difference for the panel that I'm showing you right now is the fact that I ended up adding a little bit of a blurred background, making it still very light because I still want Koji and Masaki to be the forefront of our panel. So I wanted to make sure that they stand out quite a bit instead of being too in the background, if that makes sense. There's this, I don't know. I think it's also because I'm very lazy with planning out the background. That's like one of the reasons I'm very much not confident with working on a comic, is because I haven't done too many drawings or illustrations where the background's in focus with the character. And I don't mean like whether or not it's blurred, because I do that a lot where I kind of use the crutch of making the background blurred so we kind of have a little bit more of that atmospheric perspective. But I mean like character interacting with the background so they look like they're actually integrated in a good way, in more of like a comic kind of way interaction versus like illustration, because I do think there is a difference. So I would like to practice that more before I actually ever commit to a comic, because as you can see, a lot of these panels have a lot of white, a lot of like airy space, which I don't think is bad, but I think if you want to make something a little bit more immersive, then you know, I think backgrounds are kind of a necessity in some of these comics. So yeah, I think that's it for the coloring portion. So other than that, I think that's it for just the entire process for the first 7 panels. So thanks for hanging out with me, guys. And if you stick around, you'll see the full comic with the rest of the half of the panels. Happy Valentine's Day, and I'll see you guys next time in the next video. Bye!